Um, this is a topic that I've put many months of research into with the International Templar Historical Committee. This is a committee that is a joint venture between the OSMTJ and the OSMTH. It is led by Chairman Dale Leopard, Grand Cross, includes Master Ronald Mangum, Grand Chancellor Bryant Jones, and myself, and Sir Tom Leamy, as well as the Grand Historian of OSMTH. Today, we're going to be talking about how we got to be the OSMTJ. This is relevant to me because when I first joined, I had a lot of questions as far as like, well, how did we get that weird name? You know, we're the Knights Templar, and now we're this weird acronym. How does all that fit together? So I went into the historical research pretty early, so without further ado, I will start my little slideshow here and share my screen. Oh, can I share the screen? It says it's disabled.
I'm looking to see. Circo, are you on?
Yeah, already he's good to go.
Oh, okay, because he said it said disabled.
now
when
it's
he tried
going.
to
No,
send it
no,
to-
no, it's kicking in.
Okay,
There he goes.
All right, can we see?
yes.
Okay. So I just want to make it clear that prior to 1705, we do have a long and documented history, which is covered in my recent essay that I published that you can find on the main page or on the Templar Digital Research Library website, which is templarlibrary.org, which is a venture of the OSMTJ Prior St. Michael. But starting at 1705, we come to the first real public showing of the Knights Templar. Prior to that, in the days of the original order, we were known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. That's a name that doesn't really roll off the tongue. It's not a name that we typically use to refer to ourselves. So, you know, over time it was shortened to the Knights Templar. But in 1705, we have the first outing of the continuance of the Knights Templar. This is the first page of the statutes of the Knights of the Order of the Temple, which was written in 1705 in the city of Versailles by the Duke of Orleans. He's the his name is Philippe II, Duke of Orleans. He became the regent of France, and under him, he had these new statutes revised, and basically the whole upper crust of the French nobility was involved at that time. It also went by some other names. For example, the Militia Templi. These were used simultaneously and interchangeably. These are not like different eras of using one thing or the other. This is from a page in the early 1800s, which was an invitation to the Duke of Sussex to join a convent, but just demonstrating we have the Militia Templi here as well as a name. But the one that became the common one was known as the Order of the Temple. Let me just say that I don't speak French, and I'm not going to attempt to speak French. I'm just going to transliterate as I see things. I work with French documents several hours a day through my research. So I can kind of sight read, but I can't speak or pronounce anything. So it's the Order of the Temple in France. And so in 1804, The Order of the Temple went from just being a manifestation of the nobility's resurgence into the Knights Templar, but became a public invitation to join with Grand Master Bernard Raymond Fabry Palaprat in 1804. So he brought it back out into the public domain as the Order of the Temple. And this was really the golden age of the early modern Templars. Once it was demonstrated to kind of be the real deal, it was endorsed by Napoleon, and they made a public procession through the streets of Paris on the anniversary of the death of Jacques de Molay, and got this big public endorsement from Napoleon. And then throughout the 1800s, it became seriously huge. As you just saw, the invitation to the Duke of Sussex to attend the convent, who was a member. There's all kinds of other members of the nobility who were members at the time. But by the mid to late 1800s, the Order of the Temple began to wane and sought to bolster its image by appealing to famous people of different kinds. So, for example, this was part of Fabry Palaprat's kind of modus operandi from the very beginning. He had members of the Order of Christ in Portugal join. He had Pedro I from Brazil, who was the Emperor of Brazil and Portugal, who became a member and who appointed Grand Prior for the Order of the Temple. And then, but once you get into like the 1850s and things like that, Fabry Palaprat, he passed away in 1838. And then his successor, which was Sir William Sidney Smith, he's a famed war hero in the Napoleonic Wars, and super famous action hero type guy of that period. And then he passed away, and then the order started to lose momentum. And what ended up happening is a lot of the original members started getting older, getting more aged, and they started getting kind of desperate for something to really kind of push things up. They went and offered the Grand Mastership to the King of Sweden, and the King of Sweden declined because he himself was very aged and he had just had a stroke. And he basically, in my shorthand, said, "I don't think this is a good idea, guys. I'm not gonna be a very good leader for this military order." So he declined. And so what we had was the Grand Priory of England. They were kind of frustrated at the lack of leadership. So they kind of broke off and they offered the Grand Mastership to King George V of King of Hanover. This is a page from the poem that was published in honor of his accepting the Grand Mastership in 1857. It says here on the bottom, published on the occasion of the King George, King of Hanover, proclaimed Grand Master of the Order of the Temple in 1857. This is the little fact of history, though, is that although he accepted it, and although it was passed through the convent for him to be Grand Master, because it was done by a schismatic group, the breaking off of the Grand Priory of England, the rest of the order didn't accept it. And so the regent at the time took the archive and deposited it in the National Archives, basically so that nobody would take the order in a direction they didn't ask for. Which leaves us to this man. This guy is a man named Josephin Péladan. And Péladan was a Christian Catholic mystic very, very famous in the late 1800s to early 20th century. He is famed for his paintings, for his novels, for he's a playwright. He's got religious writings, philosophical writings. He was really an every man's man, and he was very, very famous of the day in Paris and Europe in general. So it was to Peladan that they turned to offer the Grand Mastership. Now, he wasn't just a random person. He had an association with the order. His father, his name was Adrian Peladan, was initiated into the order in 1840. And so he was very proud of his father's involvement, who was also a knight of the Golden Spur and of St. Sylvester. His father was knighted by the Pope himself. And so Peladan embraced the Templar image. And however, this guy had his fingers in an awful lot of things, so much so that he really didn't have time to take on the order. I mean, he did, he took it in name, but he didn't give it the attention it deserved. This quote is going to give you a little idea. It says, Peladan will one day be the object of detailed study, the novelist of some French, and the playwright of Babylon and some French, and the philosopher of some French, and the art critic, the savant of the ideas and forms, and finally the zealoter of the Rose Cross is an infinitely curious student who built 6 careers simultaneously, of which one alone would have been sufficient for the activity of a writer. The point is he had a lot of things going on, and he received the regency of the Order of the Temple, but he didn't do much with it. He kind of let it languish, and this is in 1892 that he received this. He had his own order that he was more focused on. It was called the Order of the Rose Cross, the Temple, and the Grail. And this was an order that was based on the idea of, well, he was an artist, so all art ought to be spiritual in nature was his claim. And so they went around doing art exhibits and things like that. And it wasn't really an order that had grades or initiations. It was more like you become part of this order if you want to express yourself spiritually. He basically claimed that if you made any piece of art that didn't have a spiritual nature to it, then it wasn't really art. All true art has a spiritual nature to it, was his claim. But he was so focused on building this up that he didn't give any investment to the Order of the Temple. So what he did is so by this time, the Order of the Temple in France was essentially dead. All the guys that were in it from the heyday were old or dead, and they weren't practicing, the meetings weren't happening, things like that. The only places where it was really occurring was in England and in Belgium. Now, Peladan had a friend named Papus, and Papus was another Christian mystic, and they jointly put together a group called the Society for Esoteric Studies or something like that. And this group, it was basically a study group, had lodges around Europe, and one of the lodges was in Belgium and Brussels, and it was called Cumrus Lodge. And the leader of Cumrus Lodge was this man, Nicholas Brossel, and another guy named Virgie, and they led the Cumrus Lodge. This is a postal letter to Nicholas Brossel from Peladan, and this is the postcard that he sent Peladan to Nicholas Brossel in Brussels. And this is a letter to Anna Brossel from Peladan. And the reason why I include that is because it shows the closeness of their relationship. For example, I might communicate with any one of you and be happy and friendly. But if I'm also writing to your sister, we might as well have Christmas dinner together, the way I see it. You know, it's a close relationship. And so here's a letter to Anna Brossel. So this is a page published by Papus from the Group for the Independent Studies, Esoteric Studies. And this page is from 1894. And 1894 is the year that Peladan passed on the regency. And what this basically says is that Papus visited the Cumrus Lodge. He met with Virgie and Brossel in Belgium and found that they were intensely enjoying their study of the Order of the Temple here in 1894. So Peladan passed on the administration of the Order of the Temple into this group, the Cumrus Lodge, to administer it because it was basically weak at the time. Now, this is a pass card for the Cumrus Lodge. This is not just a random one. This is one that is actually in my possession for the Templar Relic exhibit that we have down in Canaan, Connecticut at Castle Christ Church. And so this is a historical item that's over there in my room. And this is one of the most important documents that we have in our possession. This is a document from Cumrus in 1934. And you'll notice under the logo, it says Secretariat International of the Templars in Brussels. And what this page is, and I have a translation on the next slide, but this is the document that is the magisterial decree to release the Order of the Temple back out from under the administrative umbrella of Cumrus back into its own entity. So it reads, I'm going to kind of skip through. So it's dated October 1934. It says, whereas the diploma, the 25th of July, 1890 creates the group, whereas the unique statutes and general depositories of Cumrus and January 1894, the decision made on the date were the statutes, rules, charters, decrees, and manifests of the sovereign military order, the Temple of the Jerusalem, with all rights issued by the Brotherhood, the President General, the General Assembly, here gathered, decides that by the decree of this day, the safeguarding of the order of the Temple of the Jerusalem, invested by the Council of Cumrus and placed on the order of the day, the following decision was agreed on this day to all who are concerned within the order and passed, that this day within the Council of Regency of the Association for the Restoration of the Sovereign and Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, who is charged to be present on this day in complete independence and under the complete responsibility of the direction and administration of the order according to the statutes, rules, charters, decrees, and manifest of the mentioned order. All Templars were invited to attend this decision. It says where it was issued, and it was issued in 1934, and the signatories you'll see it includes one Emil Isaac Vandenberg, who was regent of the order of the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem in 1934. So this is the document that originates the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, as it was launched out of the Cumrus Lodge. This is a copy of the statutes and registration of the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem in Brussels by Theodore Corvius, who was regent in 1932. And so this is just an initial copy of that registration. It's not very legible. And I just wanted to point out, so the Knights Hospitaller are today known as the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, the SMOM. So the Templars then were known as the Knights Templar, but now we use a very similar acronym, the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem. So you see how things kind of line up and have synchronized in that way a little bit. And just so you know, it is policy, although we are known as the OSMTJ, it is policy to be able to use that acronym in the native language of whoever's speaking it, although the official is French. So from here, this is 20th century stuff here. So we have the 1932 registration in Brussels up top with Theodore Corvius. From that point on, things were pretty smooth. You might have heard, I don't know how many people have read in detail the histories on the website, theknightstemplar.org, or anything like that, or in the introductory manual, for example. But in this period here, there's actually some misinformation that has been corrected by the research of the committee in the past year. So currently, we now believe this is a very smooth period of time overall. It's been said that, for example, that Antonio Fontes refused to give the archive back to Emil Isaac Vandenberg. I recently released a paper that proved that was false and was a politically motivated rumor. So this is where we get some of the different modern names. So in 1970, there was an election between Fernando de Souza Fontes and General Zadrojski. And this is a very contentious election in the Templar world because Zadrojski won the election, but Fontes did not accept the election. He didn't accept the election results, which caused a big schism in the Templar world. So Fontes comes over here and he changes the name to the Latin acronym, means the exact same thing, except it's in Latin. And from there, continues his line. Now, one thing that you should recognize is that with most schismatic groups, it's usually the authentic that carries the original acronym, whereas the person who's being the schismatic or the dissident, they have to change the acronym. So this is evidenced by the fact that Fontes changes the acronym. We saw how OSMTJ is the official registration back in 1932. According to the 1967 statutes, the official order, the language of the order at that time was French and French only. So that was the official name of the order, was OSMTJ. So Zadrojski maintains OSMTJ, and we carry that down today with Master Ronald Mangum and our USA Grand Priory being Knights Templar of America and the knightstemplar.org. However, the modern groups, one of the things that I was very, very confused on when I first started was what's with all the OSM stuff and the SMOTJ and all this stuff. This is basically the way it works out. So Fontes leads his OSMTH until 1995. And in 1995, his group had another split. And they broke off and became OSMTH.org, whose USA Grand Priory is known as SMOTJ, for Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem. And the ones that stayed with Fontes who passed away in 2018, became osmth.net, and whose current grandmaster is Gerard Willery. So this is kind of the landscape of major branches. Now there's plenty of minor branches of people who claim succession or steal succession, or who don't have any succession at all. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of these groups. These are the groups that generally are considered to be authentic and legitimate. So we fraternally recognize other Templar groups with legitimate Templar successions, and ongoing efforts are being made for unity, brotherhood, and mutual cooperation between all of these little groups that are existing right there. Here we have one of the cooperation agreements that Master Mangum signed with one of the groups, the OSMTH Magnum Magisterium. And here's another one that he signed earlier this year with OSMTH 1804. And this is our current Grandmaster, Master Ronald Mangum. And the reason why I bring it up too is because he's a member of our International Templar Historical Committee. I owe a great debt to him. And I know that on the normal kind of priority level, not everybody sees a lot of interaction because that's on the international level. But I just want to assure you all that he's neck deep in the affairs of the order 24/7. And again, he's always working toward Templar unity and cooperation. Not every other Templar branch has the same goodwill and faith toward one another as he does. So just be aware of that. And that concludes that part of the presentation. Now, I do want to open it up to any questions, not only about what I have spoken about, but if you just have any general questions about the history of the order post suppression.